For people who don't know, 2009 during this operation, that's why we're responding, obviously with the humanitarian nature of this, because 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's mainly what the expertise is, at least as far as Marines go. It's not really combat operations for the most part, even though Indonesia, among other parts in that world, are large networks for terrorists and insurgents. So having that expertise of going in and try to help people, I think is also good to us because it teaches you the balance of it. Instead of being a war fighter, you actually get to help people. Instead of launching bullets at people, you're still helping people in a different cause. You still get to be heroes for people, which is great. So totally incidental as far as our encounter. When we went onto the slope, because we had our LZ, it was a hasty LZ, and they're dropping supplies. They have, a bunch of stuff, and it's other helos too. They're just kind of forming a perimeter around the city, dropping Marines here. You could provide overwatch. Now, the only thing that's unsettling with this is the fact that they never gave us any comms. You know as well as I do how risky that is.
You didn't have any comms?
We didn't have any comms.
Interesting.
So the Marine that was with me, it was a higher rank than me, was very pissed off about it because he was a Fallujah Marine, so he went through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And one of those things, I remember him kept telling me, he's like, if everything ends up going to shit, and you look at me and if I'm fine, it means that you're going to be fine. And I remember him telling us all that in the stick, and he's a good Marine. He's a very outstanding guy. Learned a lot from him during my time in. And I thought about that concept, but then he started picking things apart too. He wasn't very comfortable with that. But luckily the thing is that we were still relatively, close enough to the LZ, because when the bird was supposed to land, because obviously they were coming in, dropping the supplies, and they'd bank off. The last one that would come down would land. That's when we'd basically run to the helo, 300 meters. You're in good shape, and you have an average combat load, 120 rounds, so to speak, with an M16A4 and a Camelback. Not really much, so you can make that trek relatively quick. But they also have security on those birds too. With the flight crew, with the gunners on the sides, they had 50s on them. So if there is some opposition, they're going to meet with those on top of us engaging them. So we were positioned near the slope. It wasn't like a steep grade or anything, but it was enough to obscure what was going on the other side that we had no idea what was going on. So we got, naturally you want to take the high ground so you have observation of everything. And this is when we came across this operation. And it was something that stuck out like a sore thumb because here you have terrain that is a jungle terrain, very green vegetation, things like that. And then you have something that's sticking out right in the middle of an opening. And it looks very odd. It's something that's, I'll remember to the rest of my life. To the day that I leave this earth, I'm going to remember seeing that. And it's just imprisoned up here. I had a camera with me. It was a Panasonic cheap camera. It had kind of like, ancient compared to what you got set up in the studio, But it was enough at least because it was part of stuff that I've never did a humanitarian assistance before. So I was taking videos of them dropping stuff off, things like that, until we trekked up to this point. I was taking some pictures because it's a place you would never really ever go to, at least the real part of Indonesia. It's not like Bali or Surabaya where it's like touristy stuff.
Yeah.
This is where it's actual cultured people. You're actually seeing reality here. So it's stuff that I kind of wanted to document and just say, I was a part of this. I can look back and say, I remember that. But then looking north past that slope and seeing that down, and I took some video and some pictures of that. And I had, I stuck it in my dump pouch. I was a saw gunner naturally, so I had M249. That was my favorite weapon. I liked having a belt-fed machine gun. As much as a pain in the ass, I liked having that compared to an M16 or an M4. So because we were in the humanitarian, all they did was give us M16A4s. They had RCOs at that time. They weren't the ACOGs. They had the mills on the sides for windage and stuff like that, as well as the PEC-15s. So if we were doing any kind of night range or night operation, we'd have those with our PVS-14s. So it's just a very basic loadout that we were doing. Nothing really crazy. And when we saw this happen, and I want to say unidentified because right now it's identified. Everybody knows what they are now. They're either man-made or they're not. And if they're not, the government's coming out and telling people, admitting it, not directly, but they're still admitting it to a degree that it exists. Because why would they spend time with this legislation coming out?
That's a good point.
Why would they do that? If it doesn't exist, why were they going through these measures to basically hold a gun up to these guys' heads and say, you better relinquish this technology or else? They're not just doing it, and knowing and seeing this unfold, even being in this position of having to brief the Senate Intelligence among the Special Intelligence Service too, which oversees the letter agencies, because they have no idea what's going on either. But the fact that all of us coming together and making this loud amount of noise to get something done about it is just astounding. And now they're finally, for the first time in history, they're going through with this and actually trying to do something about it for their own understanding, but also know the corruption that's comes from this.
Yeah.
It's multiple different facets.
I mean, you guys already, all 5 of you, right, already testified in front of Congress?
So we testified to people of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which where there's some Congress people there as well as some senators.
So in front of the Intelligence Committee by the Senate?
And
Senate.
and you know as well as I do, in any kind of setting like that, whether you're in a skiff, it's all under oath still, because they're having you sign NDAs and things like that. So you're expected to be truthful with this. Mm-hmm. And seeing the reaction,
big deal.
It is a very big deal. It was nerve-wracking at first because I'm not used to talking to government officials in that nature. And having the support that they've been giving me as well as the protection is just something that I'm very thankful for. I'm very thankful that they all have open minds of this subject.
I want to tell you all about this new meat delivery service I found called Moink. What I really, really like about Moink is they are from a small, rural farm town in Missouri, LaBelle, Missouri, right by where I grew up, and I love supporting small town business USA. Now, when I started looking into Moink, they educated me on the meat industry, and I want to share with you all a couple of facts, according to Moink magazine. 60% of all pork is produced by one company in the U.S., and that is 100% owned by the Chinese. 4 companies control over 80% of the meat industry in the United States. More than 10,000 different additives are allowed in the U.S. food supply. 99% of chicken, 95% of hogs, 78% of cattle in the U.S. are raised in confinement buildings or feedlots. That means they're not moving around freely. 80% of the antibiotics consumed in the U.S. are fed to animals. Here's a stat. In 2016, 18.4 million pounds of antibiotics were sold for livestock. And that's what you're eating. Suicide rates amongst farmers are the highest than any other profession, and that includes veterans, believe it or not. I found that alarming. Now, here's what Moink is doing to combat some of this stuff, which I really appreciate. Their livestock is 100% born and raised and harvested humanely in the United States of America. Their farms practice regenerative agricultural methods. They are free of GMOs, antibiotics, and all hormones. Their Alaska salmon is wild caught. Their beef and lamb are grass-fed and grass-finished. Their boxes ship from rural America, right in small town Missouri. Love it. Their chicken and pork are pasture-raised. So, guys, check them out. Moink. Keep America farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/SRS. Right now, listeners on this show get free bacon in your first box. It will be the best bacon you will ever taste, but it's only for a limited time. It's spelled Moink, MOINK, box.com/SRS. That's moinkbox.com/SRS.
Even though for years there's been a stigma to it. For years there's been a giggle effect because of little green men and flying saucers and all that. I myself never thought to this day that I'd ever see anything like this. So going back to the event, we decided to get in a tactical column and approach this, right? And we got down the slope, and it's just like a clearing and just has this big opening. It's almost a little bit more than the football field because this craft took up a majority of that.
So let's just back up for a minute. Let's describe the setting, because at first you said there were helos doing racetracks around. Is this the same opening that you described earlier that you were watching helos drop supplies?
No.
Okay.
So where this was happening was southwest, at least where the helo insertion points were with the LZs that they were setting up, and they were flying very low in consideration, right? So, and the reason why I know this is because I asked the pilots after this, because I was on the officers' mess and I knew their call signs, and I approached them and I asked them very respectfully if they noticed anything strange. None of them said anything.
Okay.
So I was trying to see if they could get a view of a topside, because this is just something that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So also their call signs all stuck out too, you know, because pilots like to do crazy stuff with their call signs, so it was very easy to track them down. But having this happen on the north part of the slope and it goes down, and obviously, you know, the way it was transitioning colors, which was kind of the way that it appealed, because it was transitioning for a light matte black, or no, sorry, a light matte gray to a dark matte black, and just kind of ranging in between, right?
Let's rewind a little bit before we get into the description.
Okay.
How far? So, what was the activity with all the other helicopters? Were they active at the time that you saw the
Honestly,
UAP?
When we started going down there, no.
Okay.
And I don't know, because obviously we were occupied with this.
How far do you think it was?
So from the LZ where we were at was 300 meters roughly, okay, plus the slope that was concealing plus vegetation. Down the slope, it was like 400 meters maybe. So we got close. We trucked down quite a bit.
Okay.
About 150 meters outside, 150, 200, right? Halfway. And
So
the reason,
maybe about a click away.
possibly, yeah.
At the
the
farthest.
craft itself might have been a click out.
Okay.
Yeah. And as like I said, the reason why I know how big this thing was because
Did you see it as you crested the
Yes.
the hill?
yes, I did, and that's where I took videos and pictures of this thing. That's how I was able to see it, because you know, taking pictures of the chaos going behind and everything. You seeing the rubble, burning buildings, flooding, and all that kind of stuff, and then you turn around. And I'm like,
So you crest this hill.
yep,
You look down into the valley.
yep.
And there's a clearing.
There's a clearing
with a UAP
yes.
just sitting there.
Sitting there,
hovering.
rotating clockwise, yep. And that's in transition, this color spectrum I was telling you too. And that's why it's something that stuck out. It's not a building, you know. It's not something that you're used to seeing. Maybe topside it could have looked like a building or something that, you know, I don't know. I don't have that perspective. I wasn't a pilot or anything, but I can tell you from our point of view, it's something that it looked very unnatural and abnormal. And that's what got our curiosity to go investigate this. Now, normally, because we would have had comms, you're damn right we'd have called it in. Report something suspicious. Maybe get some eyes on a helo, get a hold of their call signs, and try to do them fly around, and they never did. And obviously, we didn't have comms to do it, but they were more occupied with what was going on behind us.